I've lived in luxury my whole life, never really questioning how we could afford the things we had. My father is a businessman, and my mother, well, she's always just been busy. I guess that's how things work when you come from wealth. You don't ask questions. You just enjoy it. But then, everything changed. The day I found out the truth, everything about my life was thrown into chaos. And I still remember every detail of that night as if it happened just yesterday. It all started at one of those fancy galas we always went to. You know the type, grand halls, crystal chandeliers, and the smell of expensive perfume everywhere. My parents, of course, were hosting. The room was filled with people in designer clothes, sipping champagne, and talking about their latest vacations or business deals. It was the same crowd I'd grown up with, people who never worried about money because they had more than enough. But something was different that night. I noticed my father seemed on edge, constantly checking his phone and looking around the room. My mother kept whispering things to him, her face serious, not like the usual bright, carefree smile she always wore at these events. I was sipping on a glass of wine, trying to make small talk with people I barely knew when I heard my father's phone buzz. He quickly excused himself and slipped out of the room, leaving my mother standing alone. I saw her face change, something like worry crossing her expression. That's when I knew something was wrong. Without really thinking about it, I followed my father out of the ballroom. He walked quickly down the hallway, heading toward one of the private rooms at the back of the mansion. I had never seen him move so fast before, like he was trying to get away from something. Or someone. I crept behind him, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor. I don't know what made me follow him, I just had this gut feeling that something wasn't right. When he reached the door of the room, he glanced over his shoulder, then slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. Curiosity got the better of me. I tiptoed over to the door, my heart racing. I knew I shouldn't be spying on my father, but something about his behavior was just off. I pressed my ear against the door, hoping to hear what was going on inside. That's when I heard voices, his voice and another man's voice, low and urgent. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard enough. They were talking about money, lots of money. But it wasn't the usual business talk I was used to hearing. They were talking about deals, secret transfers, offshore accounts. It all sounded shady, like something you'd hear in a crime movie. My father's voice was tense, not the calm, confident tone he usually had. Suddenly, I heard the man say something that made my blood run cold. If this goes wrong, we're all going down. You know the risks, right? I froze. What risks? What was my father involved in? My mind raced as I tried to put the pieces together. But before I could think any further, I heard footsteps approaching. I panicked and darted around the corner, hiding behind a large plant just as the door swung open. The man I'd heard talking with my father stepped out first. He was tall, with a sharp suit and an even sharper look in his eyes. I recognized him, he was one of my father's closest business partners. But something about him felt different tonight. He looked nervous, almost as if he was expecting something bad to happen. My father followed behind him, his face pale, his jaw clenched. They both walked quickly down the hall, back toward the ballroom, leaving me standing there, completely shaken. I had so many questions. What were they talking about? What kind of deal was my father involved in that had him so on edge? And why did it feel like something dangerous was happening right under our noses? I knew I couldn't ask him directly, he'd never tell me the truth. So I decided to do some digging on my own. I went back into the ballroom, trying to act normal, but my mind was spinning. I couldn't focus on anything except what I had just overheard. That night, after the party ended, I waited until everyone was asleep. Then, I snuck into my father's office. It wasn't hard, he always kept his office unlocked, probably because he never thought anyone would go snooping. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know what was going on. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Emails, bank statements, all pointing to some kind of massive financial scheme. My father and his business partner were moving money around in ways that didn't make sense, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, disappearing into hidden accounts overseas. As I scrolled through the files, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. This wasn't just a bad business decision. This was illegal. My father was involved in something criminal, and if it came out, our entire family would be ruined. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront him? Tell my mother? Go to the authorities? Every option felt impossible. If I exposed him, I'd be destroying my own family. But if I did nothing, I'd be living with the knowledge that my father was a criminal. Days passed, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I looked at my father, I saw a different man. A man with secrets. A man who wasn't who I thought he was. The worst part was, I couldn't talk to anyone about it. My friends, my mother, they all thought we were the perfect family. They had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. Then, one evening, everything came crashing down. I was sitting in the living room when I heard a knock at the door. My mother answered, and within seconds, I heard raised voices. I rushed to see what was happening, and there they were, police officers, standing in our doorway. My heart stopped. I knew why they were there. My father came down the stairs, calm as ever, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The officer started asking him questions, and it didn't take long before they were leading him out of the house in handcuffs. I stood there, frozen, as my entire world fell apart. My mother was crying, screaming at the officers, demanding to know what was happening. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had known it for weeks. As I watched my father being taken away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, and relief. The secret was out, but at what cost? Our luxurious life, the wealth we had always taken for granted, was built on lies. And now, it was all crumbling down. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that nothing would ever be the same. My father was gone, our family was broken, and the life I thought I knew was just a facade. But at least now, I knew the truth. And maybe, just maybe, I could start figuring out who I really was, outside of all the lies.